What we're talking about is the instincts, sex, security, and society, and the security is partially the emotional security or insecurity, and then the other is the financial or material insecurity or security. And then beyond that, we talk about several of the different steps. What got me interested in this was step 6. And I was in a step 6 meeting with an old guy by the name of Big Book Joe. And we read the entire chapter from the 12 by 12. And when we got through, he took the book back and he started chatting. And he said that the way this Bill wrote those steps, he said that we became willing to have God remove our defects of character. And then in step 7, he said, we humbly asked God to take care of our shortcomings, get rid of them. And he said, nowhere in there did it say anything about Joe. Didn't ask me to do anything. He says, so maybe if I got working on my shortcomings and my character defects, I would be in God's way. He's got a plan. And he said, so what I decided to do, I'm not trying to sell anything here, I'm just telling you what he said and what I bought. He said what I decided to do, I was going to go for a year, and the only thing I was going to do was use prayer. And he says, I knew that prayer would not get in God's way. And he says, at the end of a year, he says, I had some remarkable results from step 6 and 7. And so I decided to do one more thing, and that was that anytime I was disturbed and I had to make a decision, I would make the decision in the way of light rather than the way of darkness. And he said it's worked out quite well. So anyway, I had been in meetings myself, quite a few meetings that dealt with 6 and 7, and I had heard people talk about making their list of their character defects, and then they indexed them, and they alphabetized them, and then one person even had a spreadsheet on his computer with his character defect. So I didn't buy that. So I went with what he had to say, and it served me pretty well. Maybe I'm just lazy, I don't know, but it has served me pretty well. So what we're going to get into is talking about what Bill Wilson has written, and he didn't have hardly anything in the big book in regards to the instincts. But when he wrote the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, he had been through that really black part of his life where he went into a terrible, terrible depression. And if it hadn't have been for that Jesuit priest that he knew who taught him about the instincts, he probably would have died. So he got all those instincts here and there in the 12 steps and 12 tradition. That's what Terry's going to be reading about. So I was going to mention one other thing, and that one word that comes up in here an awful lot in Bill's writings is a word desire. And that word desire goes way back to God. You know, God in one of the books I read said that I'm perfect and I know I'm perfect. I live in a perfect world where there's only love. I have no wants and I have no needs, but I have one desire, and that's for your gratitude. So Terry's going to start reading now.
Did you read page 65, since most of us are born with an abundance?
Yeah, there's one part that Bill wrote in on page 65, and just part of a paragraph where he said that most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, so it isn't strange that we often let them outdo their intended purpose. And when they drive us blindly or willfully demand that they supply us with more pleasures than are possible or due us, that is the nature of our defects, or the measure of our defects.
So we're going to start on page 42 in the 4th step. And we're going to start with creation. Creation gave us instincts for a purpose. Without them, we wouldn't be complete human beings. If men and women didn't exert themselves to be secure in their persons, made no effort to harvest food or construct shelter, there would be no survival. If they didn't reproduce, the earth wouldn't be populated. If there were no social instinct, if men cared nothing for the society of one another, there would be no society. So these desires for the sex relation, for material and emotional security, and for companionship are perfectly necessary and right, and surely God-given. Yet these instincts, so necessary for our existence, often far exceed their proper function. Powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, they drive us, dominate us, and insist upon ruling our lives. Our desires for sex, for material and emotional security, and for an important place in society often tyrannize us. When thus out of joint, man's natural desires cause him great trouble, practically all the trouble there is. No human being, however good, is exempt from these troubles. Nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instinct. When that happens, our great natural assets, the instincts, are turned into physical and mental liabilities. We're going to jump ahead to page 64. The very last sentence on the page, we're going to start with, He did not design man to destroy himself by alcohol, but he did give man instincts to help him stay alive. It is nowhere evident, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us fully to eliminate our instinctual drives. So far as we know, it is nowhere on record that God has completely removed from any human being all his natural drives.
If we believe what Bill writes in the books, that to me proves that we get these instincts at birth and they're God-given, and nowhere on record is it recorded that we've ever lost them. Anybody's ever lost them. We have them till the day we die. So
we're going to go to page 44 next. And on the first full paragraph, starting with, every time a person imposes his instincts unreasonably upon others, unhappiness follows. If the pursuit of wealth tramples upon people who happen to be in the way, then anger, jealousy, and revenge are likely to be aroused. If sex runs riot, there is a similar uproar. Demands made upon other people for too much attention, protection, and love can only invite domination or revulsion in the protectors themselves. Two emotions quite as unhealthy as the demands which evoke them. When an individual's desire for prestige becomes uncontrollable, whether in the sewing circle or at the international conference table, other people suffer and often revolt. This collision of instincts can produce anything from a cold snub to a blazing revolution. In these ways, we are set in conflict not only with ourselves, but with other people who have instincts too. And we're going to go to page 48 next. And again to the very bottom of the page, starting with the last sentence. For pride, leading to self-justification and always spurred by conscious or unconscious fears, is the basic breeder of most human difficulties, the chief block to true progress. Pride lures us into making demands upon ourselves or upon others which cannot be met without perverting or misusing our God-given instincts. When the satisfaction of our instincts for sex, security, and society become the sole object of our lives, then pride steps in to justify our excesses.
That included fear, and this is one of the only things that we only have two things that aren't AA that we read here, and this one's on fear, and it comes from Conversations with God, the book Conversations with God. Page 19, if you ever want to read this and find it. Fear is the energy which contracts, closes down, draws in, runs, hides, hoards, harms, and harms. Love is the energy which expands, opens up, sends out, stays, reveals, shares, heals. Fear wraps our bodies in clothing. Love allows us to stand naked. Fear clings to and clutches all that we have. Love gives all that we have away. Fear holds close, love holds dear. Fear grasps, love lets go. Fear rankles, love soothes. Fear attacks, love amends. Every human thought, word, or deed is based on one emotion or the other. You have no choice about this because there's nothing else from which to choose. But you do have a choice about which of these you select. So I think that's pretty darn good about fear.
We're going to page 51 next. The first full paragraph. Starting with, also of importance for most alcoholics are the questions they must ask about their behavior respecting financial and emotional securities. In these areas, fear, greed, possessiveness, and pride have too often done their worst. Want me to read the thing?
Yes, if you would.
Here's the thing, and Dean doesn't remember where he got this from, so there's no way to reference it. The number of things just outside the perimeter of my financial reach remains constant no matter how much my financial condition improves. With each increase in my income, a new perimeter forms, and I experience the same relative sense of lack. I believe that I would be happy if only my earnings were increased by so much and I could then have or do these few things I can't quite afford. But when my income does increase, I find that I'm still unhappy because from my new financial position, I can now see a whole new set of things I don't have. The problem will be resolved when I realize that happiness is a present attitude and not a future condition.
How neat. Yeah.
So the next page will be page 57. First full paragraph, starting with, what are we likely to receive from step 5? For one thing, we shall get rid of that terrible sense of isolation we've always had. Almost without exception, alcoholics are tortured by loneliness. Even before our drinking got bad and people began to cut us off, nearly all of us suffered that feeling that we didn't quite belong. Either we were shy and dared not draw near others, or we were apt to be noisy good fellows, craving attention and companionship, but never getting it, or at least to our way of thinking. There was always that mysterious barrier we could neither surmount nor understand. It was as if we were actors on a stage, suddenly realized we did not know a single line of our parts. Okay. Page 71 next. Page 71, first full paragraph, starting with, certainly no alcoholic and surely no member of AA wants to deprecate material achievement. Nor do we enter into debate with the many who still so passionately cling to the belief that to satisfy our basic natural desires is the main object of life. But we are sure that no class of people in the world ever made a worse mess of trying to live by this formula than alcoholics. For thousands of years, we have been demanding more than our share of security, prestige, and romance. When we seemed to be succeeding, we drank to dream still greater dreams. When we were frustrated, even in part, we drank for oblivion. Never was there enough of what we thought we wanted. And page 80. We're going to go down to the second full paragraph, starting with, We might next ask ourselves what we mean when we say that we have harmed other people. What kinds of harm do people do one another anyway? To define the word harm in a practical way, let us call it the result of instincts in collision, which cause physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage to people. If our tempers are consistently bad, we arouse anger in others. If we lie or cheat, we deprive others not only of their worldly goods, but of their emotional security and peace of mind. We really issue them an invitation to become contemptuous and vengeful. If our sex conduct is selfish, we may excite jealousy, misery, and a strong desire to retaliate in kind. And then page 114. So we're looking at the third paragraph, the seventh line down. Starting with, and as we grow spiritually, we find that our old attitudes towards our instincts need to undergo drastic revisions. Our desires for emotional security and wealth, for personal prestige and power, for romance and for family satisfactions, all these have to be tempered and redirected. We have learned that the satisfaction of instincts cannot be the sole end and aim of our lives. If we place instincts first, we have got the cart before the horse. We should be pulled backward into disillusionment. But when we are willing to place spiritual growth first, then and only then do we have a real chance.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah.
You know, what are we talking about with the instincts? We're talking about, the four areas, and what we're talking about is trying to get some balance in the instincts. We know from the first page of step 4 that we've got these and we couldn't survive without them, and yet they can be our destruction if they're left just unabated and to go whatever measure they want to go. So this whole thing starts out with desire, and from what I've read, desire is a word that can be creative. If we think long enough and strong enough on a desire, pretty soon it has developed a need. Just take one of the instincts as a result of that. Take sex, for instance. If the desire becomes so strong for sex that it creates a need, then the need is what the problem is. The person has to have whatever that need is. And the need is also constructive. It can create it by itself. And what it creates is a addiction, straight up. Now, this is just my idea of, and my opinion of how I view the instincts. Like, there's a wire stretched across my life, and we've got the sex relation, I've got the place in society, I got emotional insecurity or security, and the same with financial or material security. And as long as I keep the desire, the need, and the addiction below, well, no addiction here, but keep the need below that level, that's where I'm supposed to be. That's how my life goes. For a normal person, I think I'm fairly normal. The sex relation, my place in society, the emotional insecurity, and financial, they all gotta be there. But when one gets out of whack and the need gets so strong that they go through the line, then that's when trouble starts. Mm-hmm. And just with alcohol, we can see it very plainly if we're alcoholic, how that addiction works. So, Terry and I have done this quite a few times for 4 years, and we do a little exit exercise later on and find out, from what people have to say, and it seems to me and him that the one thing that bothers people the most is not money and it isn't sex, it's place in society. Everybody wants to be just a little. Bill wrote that in the big book. He said, which one of us doesn't like to feel just a little bit superior to everybody else, or a lot at times? And we want to be noticed, and we want to be special, and we want to be called on in an AA meeting, and we get a little bit disturbed when we're not. And at least I do.
A lot.
And so anyway, that's kind of how this goes.